Hello, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Christine. I like to read. I like to read a lot of dark and disturbing things, but today I have a book review for a book that is, well, I guess it's a little dark. I just finished reading The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, and I am here to review it. So let's just get into it. Just a little background for me, I am not a huge fantasy reader. I have dabbled in fantasy. I especially like fantasy if it's a little bit on the darker side, uh, along the lines of Game of Thrones. So I had heard more and more about this book being something that if you like Game of Thrones, that you would like this as well. I actually had this book sitting on my shelf for a few years. I got it in a Caffeine and Legends box, so it has just been sitting on my shelf because I'm going to admit I was a little intimidated by this chunky book with what looked like quite an epic tale that, I don't know, it just intimidated me. Sometimes fantasy intimidates me because I feel like it's a commitment that I'm not always sure I'm ready for. There's usually a lot of world building and things to understand, and sometimes you're just looking for an easier book to read, and so this one kind of just took a back seat for a while. But after hearing about quite a few people telling me, oh, I think you'll like this because it is on the darker side, I decided to give it a shot. It was on my list of 23 to read in 2023, and I am glad I did. I'm just going to talk to you about the basic plot of the book and what I liked and what I didn't like, and then at the end what I rated it. So the plot of this book is basically we're just following three characters as they go on their journey throughout life. And there is not a lot of world building done in this book, which I think could be a double-edged sword. You will either like that fact or you will want more. For me, it was a little of both. So we are following these characters in a world where 300 years ago, there were these gods, and they were all like animal gods. So like a snake god, a wolf god, a dragon god, a rat god. And like all gods, they were very petty, and they got in a big fight and ended up killing each other and became extinct. They had ruled the world, and it seems that like the vibe that it's giving is that they were not good for humans. There are still some people who have this like that descend from the god bloodline who I guess are like human god hybrids, god halflings, whatever you want to call it, in whatever mythology you're following, but they have some special powers because they have this blood running through their veins. And it seems that in this world, all of those people have been captured and are owned basically as slaves by rich people who keep them with like a steel collar that is kind of bound with this magic that will make it so that they can control these hybrids. So they use them for their own advantage, basically, because they're considered too dangerous to be out in the wild. I guess dangerous to those people that are rich and want to have the power. So we're following three characters. The first one, her name is Elvar. She is the daughter of a Jarl who, so basically she has lived a privileged life. Her family is very well off, but instead of living that life and being married off to form an alliance and have lots of babies, she wants to go off on her own. So she just takes off and joins like a warrior group called the Bloodsworn. She just wants to be a kick-ass warrior and earn her own battle fame, and that's exactly what she does. She joins this group. She's been with them for years. She hasn't been home in a long time, and she's just doing her thing, and she has proven herself to her bloodsworn, I almost said team, I guess family, and to herself. So she's living that life. Our next character is named Varg. He is a male character who was at one point a thrall, and he escapes his slavedom, and he has sworn an oath to avenge his sister. So basically, he knows his sister was taken and killed. He doesn't know how or why, and he wants to find out. So he needs to find a special person who can perform this magic spell to see what exactly happened to his sister. Was she killed? How did she die? What is going on? So in order to do this, he finds himself in with this other group of warriors who I guess owns this magic user that can perform the spell, but he needs to kind of prove himself to this group of warriors in order to get this benefit, I guess, from her. So he's on that mission. And our third character is Orca. Now, Orca was at one point a very vicious killer, warrior, and she has settled down. She's kind of like retired that life. She has a son and a husband, and she just wants to live a simple life. And because of her name, Orca, and because of her history, I am totally reminded of the character Viv from Legends and Lattes, and I could only just picture this the whole time. Orca is not described as an orc. She is just described as human, but they are like the same person. So I pictured that the whole time. We don't know her whole past, but we know she can kick some ass. And something happens where she now has to find out what happened to her son. So she is on that mission. And basically we are following these three characters as they navigate their way through this world and eventually will meet up some similar fate in the end, or meet up together. The first thing that really stood out to me and I found so refreshing is that in this world, men and women, males and females, are equal. Now, I've read a lot of books where we have some kick-ass female characters, which I love. However, a lot of times they are the exception, not the rule. And in this world, at least it seemed to me, is that they were just equal. It was not uncommon for a woman to be a warrior. It was in these groups of bloodsworn, it seems like it's 50-50, men and women. It's not a big deal basically for these women to be so kick-ass and tough. And I really like that. It made me think many times while reading this that I haven't seen that before. Not that I can think of, where these characters were just equal. So point one for John Gwynne. The next thing that I really liked is there wasn't a ton of info dumping. And while there were times that I did want some more information or things explained to me, John Gwynne does more showing you rather than telling you. So within the first 100 pages, we have some epic battles already with trolls, with like sea serpents, and instead of, I feel like that was his way of showing us what this world is like. This world is dangerous, it is brutal, there are all these other creatures out there, and while I would have liked to have gotten a little more information about them at times, I do like that he showed us rather than told us. The only exception is that there's some characters listed in the very beginning, like some creatures, and I'm not familiar with what these creatures are. And while they are kind of described, I wanted just a little bit more. I felt like a lot of it was kind of thrown at me at the beginning and I was a little bit confused. But I'm talking about things I like, so let me roll back a bit. The epic battles. I have been a fan of the God of War video games way back since the very first one on PlayStation 2, and this so many times reminded me of the God of War series. In the first God of War, like one of the first battles you have is this Hydra that pops up on the side of a ship and you're fighting it, and it was the same thing like with the sea serpent, and I was loving it. I was loving the action, I was loving the grandiose creatures, and it was just a fun time. Another thing I really liked is that the chapters are fairly short. So each chapter is going back and forth between our three main characters. So one chapter will be Elvar, then Orca, then Varg, and things are moving pretty quickly. You never are like, oh no, I'm stuck with this character, this is so boring. I found the short chapters made it a little bit easier to digest. This book, I mean, it's a chunky book and I could see how that would be a bit intimidating, but it's broken down pretty nicely, so that was a plus for me. On to the things that I didn't like quite as much, and I would say I'm being a little bit nitpicky here, so Don't come after me. First of all is the terminology that's used in this book. At the beginning, I was trying to look up a lot of words, a little bit unsure if these were words that I should actually know, or are these words that are made up within this world. And it was a combination of both. So I think some of the characters, or the creatures, I should say, come from Norse mythology, which I'm not really familiar with. I've read a lot more Greek mythology than Norse. So that was like a new concept, and a lot of the, I guess, titles of characters and uh, their equipment and their weapons. I've played my share of nerdy role-playing games, but there was still quite a few terms that I was not familiar with. And at first it was a little bit overwhelming, and I just had to tell myself, just go with it. Just go with it. You'll figure it out. And you do. That kind of brings me to the second dislike, which is kind of a tangent off of that, is that John Gwynne uses the same terms for weapons and armor ad nauseum. Like a seax, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, the brinja, which I think is like the chainmail that they wear, and a seax is basically shorter than a sword, longer than a dagger, to my understanding. These weapons and armor are used throughout the book, and you will hear these same two words just over and over in every chapter repeatedly. I kind of wanted him to pick up a thesaurus and use a different word. Call it a blade, call it a weapon, call it anything but a seax, please. I just, you could totally play a drinking game and be drunk off one chapter reading this. So I'm not sure if that was intentional that he did that, but I just wanted a little more variety there. My next little minor complaint I already kind of talked about was that there's no explanation, not a huge explanation about the creatures in this book. And that's fine. I just feel like we would have gotten a little bit more attached to those creatures that kind of resurface in the book later on. And I felt like the reader just could have gotten more out of it. The same thing with the characters. I felt like the characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more. And you know what? This is the first book in a trilogy. Perhaps we will be exploring that in the second book or the third book. I'm not sure. So overall, what did I think of this book? I really enjoyed this. I was giving it 4 stars out of 5 the whole time I was reading it. I think the ending did bump it up a little bit for me to like a 4.25 star, maybe 4.5. The ending really did it had some twists, it had some surprises. I liked it. Is it like Game of Thrones? I didn't really get a Game of Thrones vibe from it. I suppose if you're looking at the overall feel of of these warriors and bloody battles, I suppose, but I felt like this had its own vibe. It definitely, like I said, gave me more God of War vibes than it did a Game of Thrones. I also feel like Game of Thrones was a lot more detailed than this, so if that was too much detail for you, then you may actually like this better. Overall, I'm really glad I picked this up and dipping my toe back into the fantasy pool. I've already picked up the second book in the Bloodsworn series, which is Hunger of the Gods. And let's just look at this epic cover. This one is even bigger than the other one. And there will be a third one in the trilogy. I also like the fact that it's a trilogy, so I know that there is like an ending and that this isn't going to go on for 10, 15 books. That makes it a little less intimidating. And I know that John Gwynne has some other series out there that I'm now interested in checking out. So you'll have to let me know if you think I will like that based on what I had to say about these. Anyway, those are just my thoughts about the book. If it sounds like something you think you would like, go ahead and pick it up. I know this has been out a few years, so you shouldn't have any problem finding it. Thank you so much for watching me ramble on about books, and I just want to say happy reading and stay spooky.